Bathroom before.
So we're going to hear a couple of words from our sponsors, and then Steve Cohen, the chair of our board, Dr. Steve Cohen, is going to make a few remarks and introduce Senator Blumenthal. So that's the process we've worked out. And so thank you all for joining us. And Megan, why don't you start by introducing our sponsors?
Sure, thank you, Tony. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Megan Gilbert, the Vice President of the Chamber of Commerce in Eastern Connecticut. Today's session is recorded. If you would not like to be in the recording, you can mute yourself and turn off your video and just watch. That's totally fine. We do have press on the line, so please be aware of that. CTN, The Day, and The Bulletin are here to cover the program, which we're so happy for. I would like to give a thank you to our annual sponsors or regional benefactors who allow us to do everything that we do at an affordable and low cost price. And I'd also like to thank today's sponsors, We Work for Health and Norwich Public Utilities. We're very grateful for their support today. And a very quick reminder that everyone who registered will receive a special coupon from the Hilton Mystic for 10% off your next dine-in experience there. So we'll be sending that out shortly after the event. But we thank you for registering and for taking the time to be here today. So with that, our first sponsor speaker is Paul Pasquitello, who is the co-chair of We Work for Health Connecticut. Thank you, Paul, for being here. We're looking forward to your update.
Hey, good morning. So it's great to be here with all of you, if only virtually. I'm co-chair of We Work for Connecticut. We Work for Health Connecticut is a coalition of biopharma companies, patient groups, and unions, and the service providers who make all the medical research happen. I'm also senior counsel and executive director at the CBIA's Connecticut Bioscience Growth Council. I'd like to take a few minutes here to tell you about all the spectacular research, the COVID-19 research that's going on in the biopharma industry, and what a critical role Connecticut biopharma companies are playing in this research effort. Now, there are two fronts in the war against COVID-19. One is the vaccine front. Now, remember, vaccines are a way to prevent you from getting a disease in the first place. The second front in the war against COVID-19 is the treatment front, ways to treat COVID-19 once you have it. COVID-19 is a viral disease, and viruses very, very difficult to defeat. There are very few treatments for viruses. Now why is this? It gets to the nature of viruses. Viruses are very, very small, 10 to 100 times smaller than the smallest bacteria. And viruses are barely an organism. They work by hijacking our own biological machinery to live and replicate. Because of how viruses live and how small they are, it's very difficult to devise a drug that can attach to a virus and kill it. Drug developers are always talking about their efforts to literally see viruses in 3 dimensions in order to understand the virus's surfaces and devise a way to latch onto it and kill it. Because viruses invade, hijack, and use our own cells to live and replicate, most drugs that target viruses are also can be very dangerous to healthy cells. So since viral treatments are so difficult to devise, this makes finding a vaccine to prevent COVID-19 infection in the first place all the more important. Luckily, there are more than 100 COVID-19 vaccines in development, and some of the most promising vaccine candidates are being developed right here in Connecticut. Remember, vaccines work by alerting, in some sense, familiarizing your own immune system to a pathogen, so that when your body comes into contact with it, the pathogen recognizes it as something alien and something to destroy. I would place the vaccines development into 5 categories. First and second are the more traditional vaccines that use a live or a weakened, a live but weakened virus or a killed coronavirus. A third type uses a different virus, one that doesn't cause disease, a virus that's engineered to have a few components of the novel coronavirus, enough to cause an immune response to kill the coronavirus. The vaccine being developed from Oxford University is of this type. So are vaccine candidates by AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson, and Merck. The 4th and 5th coronavirus vaccine types are perhaps the most promising. and the most likely to be available sooner rather than later. One uses something called messenger RNA in our own cells to make some of the coronavirus proteins needed for our immune system to recognize and mount an attack on the novel coronavirus. These mRNA vaccines have been used in cancer treatment. They turbocharge both our innate and also our acquired immune systems and involved a simpler and faster manufacturing process. An mRNA vaccine developed by Moderna has gotten a lot of notoriety. It caused the stock market to go way up a couple of weeks ago. But Pfizer, right here in Groton, actually has no fewer than 4 mRNA vaccines in development. And just yesterday, Pfizer received fast track designation from the FDA. So essentially an expedited review process for 2 of its mRNA vaccines. The final category of vaccines I'll mention are a new type that manufacture coronavirus proteins outside in cell cultures, which are then injected to provoke an immune response. This technology was developed right here in Connecticut also, in Meriden, by Protein Sciences, now part of Sanofi, and it's used in its flu vaccine. I'll close just by saying how optimistic I am that a safe and effective vaccine will be developed and it will be available, I think in small quantities, perhaps late this year, and widely available in 2021. There's been remarkable collaboration among the government and private industry and among biopharma companies. Already, the major biopharma players have agreed to pool their vaccine manufacturing capacity. Some companies are so confident about their vaccines that they've risked hundreds of millions of dollars to begin vaccine production during clinical trials, betting that their vaccine will be approved so that it'll be available as soon as possible. So with that, I'll turn it back to our next speaker.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Paul. That is such great news. I'm sure we're all excited to be watching that progress. At this time, our next presenting sponsor, we are very appreciative of them, is Norwich Public Utilities, and we'd like to hear from Chris Riley.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Tony, for another great chamber event. Virtual or in real life, you guys always knock it out of the park. And we appreciate you putting together such an important event for us this morning. I mean, obviously, these are unprecedented times. Every facet of life has been disrupted. The economy has been turned upside down, and there's so much despair and there's so much unknown that it's an unprecedented, unimaginable time. At Norwich Public Utilities, you know, just like everyone else, we're doing the best that we can. Under the leadership of our general manager, Chris LaRose, we have taken a number of steps to play an important role in the day-to-day life of our community. We've obviously put the health and safety of our employees and the community first and foremost in our minds. We have instituted a moratorium on utility shutoffs until September 9th, although we're not regulated by the Department of Public Utility by PURA. We extended that till September 9th ahead of when they did. We have dramatically reduced late fee penalties, something that we feel very strongly about. And we're working with hundreds and hundreds of customers. As of this morning, 683 customers on special payment plans that allow them to pay back past due balances without interest. Every employee that's a member, all of our employees are members of bargaining units, and we overwhelmingly voted to defer raises that were due on July 1st until later in the year so that we can get through this very difficult time. This has placed, like every other business, an enormous strain on our finances, and we've deferred a lot of capital investment that we were going to be making, but we need to focus on the day-to-day, the here and now, and what's best for our customers and for our community. So this is without question the largest, the most significant challenge in the 112-year history of Norwich Public Utilities, but just as our team is the best it can be during a storm or an emergency, I'm confident that working hand in hand, our team is going to help us get through this dark time because of our commitment and our dedication. And I think those same attributes can be applied to Senator Blumenthal. He has been fighting first, last, and always for the people in Connecticut, Eastern Connecticut, everywhere. When looking at the economic impact, the health and safety impact of the coronavirus, we're so lucky to have his leadership force, not just in Connecticut, but in Washington. And we're very interested to hear what he has to say, not just about the pandemic, but some of the societal issues that have been going on. He has a lifelong commitment to human rights and civil rights, and it's gratifying to see him continue to play that role during such challenging and interesting times, not just in Connecticut, but across the country. So Tony and Megan, thank you, and welcome virtually, Senator Blumenthal, back to Eastern Connecticut.
Thank you. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Chris. Senator, we're so happy to have you here. I would just like to call very briefly on Steve Cohen, the President and CEO of Mystic Aquarium and the Chair of the Chamber's Board of Directors, for some brief remarks and to introduce our featured speaker today.
Thank you, Megan. First of all, I want to acknowledge the tremendous work that Tony, Megan, and the Chamber staff have been doing during the pandemic. It really has been an incredible effort on their part to find ways to serve the community, the business community, and the community at large. They've been very dedicated, and they're working under some tough circumstances, which I won't get into. But we thank you very much for all you're doing. Secondly, I want to mention that the Chamber Board is very committed to ways in which we can be more helpful to businesses in the area during this time, and also address some of the key issues that this region and the nation are facing. So one of the key issues that we've been talking about is race, and how we can do a better job in southeastern Connecticut as a business community in addressing issues of race, not only in being more inclusive, but also in being very explicit about the presence of racism in our society and in our region and the need to address it. So that's very top of mind for the board. It's my pleasure to introduce someone to whom those issues are not at all new. Someone who has been working on all of those issues, with the exception of COVID-19, certainly issues of health and well-being of our citizens, certainly issues of race. Senator Dick Blumenthal, we know as the senior senator from Connecticut, and he fits that role so well as an advocate for Connecticut and as a truth teller, really, in Washington. He is enormously respected in the United States Senator as someone who speaks his mind, but is also reasonable and who engages in dialogue with others. That doesn't happen a lot right now on the national scene. And Senator Blumenthal is recognized as somebody who doesn't just engage in partisan discussions. He engages in discussion, dialogue, engagement, trying to get to the truth and the essence of things. That's really what has been the hallmark of his career as a United States attorney in Connecticut, as the Attorney General in Connecticut, as a state representative, a state senator, as a father and resident. That really is the hallmark of his career. And he started out in his early years as an advocate for the NAACP and as part of the NAACP's legal efforts. So the issues that we're facing today, economic, health, race, are not new to him. He's not a newbie to these important national issues and regional issues. Finally, I just want to say that Senator Blumenthal is somebody who knows people in Connecticut, and it is truly amazing to see his personal connection with people in our region and throughout the state, and the depth of his caring for people and for the issues that they're facing. So it's my pleasure to introduce our friend, our neighbor, Senator Dick Blumenthal.
Thank you so much, Steve. Those words really have enormous meaning to me, and I thank you so much for them. And just to thank Steve for the extraordinary work he is doing at the Mystic Aquarium. His record there, I think, has been historic in its impact on Connecticut's education, cultural, economic achievements, particularly in this part of the state. And he's brought so much joy and learning to the people of Connecticut. As a visitor with my 4 children on many occasions to the Mystic Aquarium, I'm now very much personally engaged and supportive, as I know all of you are, in the work that Steve is doing in this very, very challenging time for the Mystic Aquarium and for so many others in our great state. I want to thank Chris Riley for his very kind words, as well as the very significant work he's doing at Norwich Public Utilities, and to Paul Pasquitello. I'm very impressed by the amount of learning that you managed to impart in such a short period of time. It's taken me a very much longer time to absorb the kinds of facts that you gave us in that very short summation. But I think it is hopeful, although we still have a lot of obstacles to surmount, and a lot of the great work is being done in Connecticut on vaccines and therapeutics, which are, in my view, equally important, because once people believe there is an effective cure, they will feel a lot safer and secure about going back to normal. And of course, that is so important for our economy as well as our healthcare system. And, you know, Steve made mention of my personal connection. I really want to thank Tony Sheridan and Megan, but I want to single out Tony because he has been a friend for so many years. In fact, it's not years, it's decades. And he's invited me to be a part of the chamber over all the years that he's been involved. And I have found those personal connections to be so rewarding personally. So if I have no other message in this gathering, virtual as it is, I feel as close to you in this format as I do, because I know so many of you who are on this call, and I wish I were with you physically, but I feel that personal connection. And that leads me to what I think is a very important point, which is, Paul, we are making enormous strides in the science here on the vaccines and therapeutics. It will be judged by history as one of the most significant scientific efforts of all time. But what has really made the difference in Connecticut is a sense of responsibility and caring for each other. And I have been so proud of the people of Connecticut. Everywhere I go, people are wearing masks. They are physical distancing. Even when I sometimes err and come too close to someone, in the rallies that I've attended, in all the personal meetings, people are really disciplined and responsible. And I think that's why Connecticut has turned the corner on this pandemic. Old-fashioned hand washing, mask wearing, physical distancing, staying home if you're vulnerable. If you look back, and I'm not going to bore you with the history of the 1918-1919 pandemic, but there are so many similarities in people failing to recognize the truth of the danger of transmission through physical proximity and contact. And I'm not going to be the least bit partisan on this call, but just the respect for science and sense of responsibility for one another that the people of Connecticut have demonstrated, I think has been really amazing. And I give credit to the business people on this call. You have helped to lead, to the chamber, to the governor, to a lot of other elected and appointed officials. But we have really come together as a community in Connecticut. Let me talk just very briefly, and then I'd love to take your questions about where I see this effort going. In Washington, we have taken a very bipartisan action in 4 emergency relief packages, the latest being the CARES Act, to address both the healthcare and the economic crises that we confront. And as I've gone around Connecticut, I've seen a lot of hardship and heartbreak. I've lost a good friend to coronavirus, a young guy whose children grew up playing with my children, was gone in 5 days. This is an insidious, deadly disease. It is a threat to our healthcare and social fabric. But in coming together, I think we've also demonstrated courage and strength. And I hope that Washington has matched that courage and strength with what we've done. At least we've begun to do it. Economically, all of you know about the PPP program. It's been made more flexible. Connecticut's received about $6.6 billion in loans that can be converted to grants. 60,000 businesses have received loans. 60,000 businesses and nonprofits have received loans. And there is still 130 billion available. So the message, if a business, a small business, and I've run into some, has not received a PPP loan, they should apply. I am hoping in the next package that we can make a PPP priority, make it even more flexible. You know, we've made it somewhat more flexible in the deadlines that are applied and the terms, 60% on payroll rather than 75%. But I believe that this program can be focused even more than it has been on smaller businesses. One of the faults or failings has been that maybe bigger businesses have had more access, but smaller businesses have begun to develop that access through community banks and other non-bank loan sources of potential borrowing. So I think for the business community, PPP has been, for many businesses, a lifeline, but many are still struggling, hanging by a thread. Restaurants, event planners, you know, the wedding, people who do weddings, all kinds of small businesses are still struggling. No underestimating the amount of challenge that we still have economically. And of course, we've added to unemployment insurance. In the next package, I hope we'll extend it. The $600 per week per person that's been added has brought people up to pretty much full pay. I know there's some controversy about whether we should continue it at the $600 level, but I think in Connecticut, at least what I've seen is anybody who needs more employees can find them. And we have to consider the difficulties that some businesses have encountered because of the incentives to stay home rather than go to work. And I can address that more fully in a little bit as well. Our hospitals need help. I visited L&M yesterday, and I have visited other hospitals all around the state, and they have been decimated fiscally. I think that's no exaggeration. Talking yesterday to Marna Bardstrom, the hospitals have been heroic, and our frontline providers have been amazing, but they need even more than the $175 billion already provided through the Provider Relief Fund in the CARES Act. The $100 billion that should come through the HEROES Act is the next step. $100 billion will help them enormously with staffing and supplies, other kinds of compensation for the deficits that they are now running. But our healthcare system is very much in crisis. And let me put in a word for the heroes here, the heroes who work at L&M and all our hospitals, docs, nurses, clinicians, the folks who take out the garbage, clean the floors, the folks who deliver mail, postal workers, grocery workers. They've reported for duty every day. Fire, police, first responders. I'm only beginning the list. The HEROES Act has a hazardous duty pay provision up to $25,000 retroactive to the beginning of this crisis for every single hero, the frontline workers, so that we can reward them, but also retain them. They're under unprecedented stress economically as well as emotionally. And I think that the least we can do is provide this hazardous duty pay to reward them and recognize their heroism, but also to retain them and to recruit more of them. I think we're going to have to also face, as we did after 9/11, the continued need to provide health care for many of these frontline workers who have seen such grief and pain and just enormous physical challenge for them, but also emotional. And I think that we need to be mindful about perhaps the kind of compensation fund that I was instrumental in furthering after 9/11 in the Senate. As it was the Zadroga Act eventually that extended the compensation fund. And I think we're going to have to think about the same kind of compensation fund for people who stepped up during this crisis. The HEROES Act also, and I'll just finish on the Washington angle of this crisis. The HEROES Act would also provide aid to state and local governments. Those local governments, I'm sure you all live in towns that are facing deficits, may have to lay off police and fire and even teachers. Also, if the schools reopen, they're going to have financial needs. The amounts of money that are in the HEROES Act for state and local governments is almost $1 trillion, I think are absolutely necessary. Connecticut would receive more than the 1.6 billion that it's already received from the CARES Act, but it very much needs it, as all of you know. And on the HEROES Act, these provisions that I've mentioned, PPP, aid for state and local governments, hospital assistance, hazardous duty pay, HEROES Fund, and a number of others. Do I think it will pass? I think some part of it will pass. I really believe that Senator McConnell, who controls the agenda, will take the House bill, the HEROES Act that passed the House of Representatives, take some parts of it, negotiate some parts of it. His own caucus, coming back from this break, has to have heard, as I have heard, about the need for additional action to meet this unparalleled economic and healthcare crisis. So I think there will be additional action from the United States Senate. But as I've told all of the advocates, I was on a call yesterday with childcare providers. Childcare is absolutely necessary for people to go back to work. They are hanging by a thread. I'm going to be visiting 2 childcare facilities today. I'm doing a roundtable on broadband because so much of Connecticut, thousands of kids have no internet connection. The homework gap exists in Connecticut. The digital divide has to be overcome. Even in a densely populated and very sophisticated area like Connecticut, we still have that homework gap and lack of connectivity. So all of these needs have to be on the minds of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle. So I truly believe that we will come together. Certainly, I hope so. Nothing is inevitable in the United States Senate, but I've been telling these advocates, make your views known to your colleagues in other states, red states and blue states, so that we have bipartisanship coming back, as we have on the first 4 packages. All of them were passed by almost unanimous margins. Let me just conclude on this note because of the references, very appropriately so, to the really historic moment of reckoning on racial inequality that we are now confronting. I've been all around the state. I've been to probably 17, 18 of these protests and demonstrations. I've been just inspired and impressed by the cries for justice, the leadership of our young people. You know, the great social movements of this country have come from young people. The people depicted in Hamilton at the time of our founding were pretty young guys. And the young people leading these demonstrations now, a continuation of the civil rights movement, also led by young people all around the state, demanding social justice. And I think we need to broaden the lens. It's not only law enforcement. I've spent most of my career as a law enforcer, as federal prosecutor, United States attorney for 4.5 years, as state attorney general for 20 years. Certainly I believe that law enforcement has to do better. I've been one of the leaders in Washington on the Justice in Policing Act, which passed the House. We still need to address it in the Senate, but I think it also relates to housing inequality there, in education, the differences in our schools quality, the need on healthcare. The communities of color in our state have disproportionately borne the brunt of this pandemic. The differences in hospitalization, infection, and death rates are truly striking as they have affected communities of color. And of course, the incident with Crystal Caldwell that occurred at the Mystic Motel. I was in Stonington for a rally just a week ago, Sunday. I've been in pretty much daily contact with community leaders, state representatives like Anthony Nolan and Chris Connolly and Kate Rowland, and other leaders, Kevin Booker, as well as leaders of the NAACP, Jen Jordan. And I've been very impressed by local leadership on this issue, and with the attorney representing Crystal Caldwell, John Strafacci. I think our community has come together, really your community, in such a really extraordinary way to support her. And our hearts go out to her. She suffered an incident that was just stomach turning. If you watch that video, it evokes such vile and vicious racial hatred. And I'm very glad that the defendants, alleged culprits, have been apprehended in New York. My hope is that they'll be extradited soon and prosecuted vigorously and fairly. I believe that the kind of support for Crystal Caldwell is a sign of the great spirit of Southeastern Connecticut rallying around her, but there's also a need for prompt and vigorous prosecution. And I have offered my assistance in seeking additional involvement of the Department of Justice, if necessary, to prosecute this incident as a hate crime, which is appropriate. It's been charged in state court as a hate crime, but so important that we recognize the importance of this social movement that is unfolding before our eyes in a very exciting way. And I look forward to coming back to Southeastern Connecticut, as I've done in other parts of the state, supporting these kinds of rallies and protests and looking to make our state better and fairer, as the people on this call I know are eager to do as well. So thank you all for joining. I'm happy to talk about any of these issues and also about the National Defense Authorization Act, now on the floor of the Senate. Literally, we will be debating it a week from yesterday when we go back, and hopefully passing it the first week we go back. The House version that was marked up, as you know, has a bit more money on submarines. We have $475 million for a second sub. They have $2+ billion. We have more for the Columbia, $175 million above the president's request for the Columbia. They have more for the second Virginia class sub, but both of them are very, very good for electric boat for our region and for the supply chain that is so very important. It's vital national security assets. And I'll just say this on the subject of national security. You know, our adversaries are not taking any pause. Despite the pandemic, they are building submarines and F-35s. That's the reason why I fought for an additional 13 F-35s, which are in the Senate mark, which of course is good for Connecticut as well as our national security because we build the engines, and more helicopters, which are built at Sikorsky and Stratford because they are so vital to our national security. Sitting on the Armed Services Committee as well as Judiciary Committee, I'm very mindful of the challenges to our national security. The world has never been a more dangerous place, and not just because of the pandemic, because our nation is being challenged in many different arenas, in many different theaters of conflict by adversaries that are all too eager to take advantage of our election vulnerabilities through cyber, of our national security vulnerabilities. If we pause in construction of vital defense assets and in the social divisions, which unfortunately they are seeking to exacerbate in this country. Vladimir Putin loves for us to be fighting with each other and loves for us to be fighting with our allies. And I think this pandemic should bring us closer together, perhaps enable us to overcome partisan divisions after the next election. Thank you all.